Hi, it's Damien Christoph here. Are you ready to take your life to the most incredible level possible in 2016? Well, we've had 3 sold-out wellness summits these last few years, but honestly, nothing comes close to the Wellness Breakthrough, and we have just 3 spots remaining. Your favourite wellness couch experts, the Wellness Guys, Karen Smith, Kim Morrison, Quirky Cooking's Joe Whitten, Marcus Pearce, and of course Carl Brock are gathering in the Dandenong Ranges for 3 days and 2 nights for one incredible event. If you want possibly the greatest peer group in health and wellness to help you catapult your life to the next level, then we'd love to see you at the Wellness Breakthrough from February 5th to the 7th. But again, there's only 3 spots available. Entry to the Breakthrough is by application only, and to apply, simply email your contact details to marcus@thewellnesscouch.com.
TheWellnessCouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Julie Tenner.
And I'm Bridget Wood. And today we're talking about the spiritual vagina. And in fact, as I was typing this in, I laughed and I thought, is anybody actually going to listen to this?
To which I responded, of course, it has vagina in it.
And so that's actually kind of a good reference for where we both are at on this topic. Because I'm what you might have called the emerging prude, maybe. And Jules is a seasoned professional.
That's hilarious, Bridget.
So I'm going to let you lead this one.
I don't even know where this is going, to be honest, but we've been talking about this podcast since the beginning of this, really.
We have.
And it came about because, as you know, if you listen to anything female birth, vagina, I'm all over it. And so one of my friend's husbands had joked with her when she was coming over to mine for a cuppa, oh, what, you're going to go talk about your vaginas and your spirituality, your spiritual vaginas like this, and she'd come over and told me, and I was like, oh my God, that's gold. Yes, spiritual vagina conversation, love it. And so we'd always kind of had in our heads, yes, we should have this conversation. But then there's this stickiness, excuse the pun, around what exactly should this be and which way do we want to take it. So we're not kind of sure. We've just decided, since we did How to Fall Back in Love with Your Husband or Your Partner last week, that this would probably be a good follow-on from that.
Because so much of that was all about, in terms of intimacy, getting vulnerable. And that can be where a lot of women have roadblocks.
Yes, absolutely. Because we're not in a culture anymore that's not even anymore, we haven't been for centuries, where sexuality and female empowerment in sexuality and the whole entire area of the vagina is acceptable. That there's shame, a whole amount of shame and guilt and trauma around all of those areas of that woman's body, of her psyche, of her bloodline. So for generations, we know this, and we've talked about this in other podcasts as well, that women's sexuality and power has almost on the same plateau been suppressed, because it is such a seductress is so powerful and sexual energy is so powerful because it can overrule the brain entirely.
It's like, in the early 1900s they would call it hysteria.
Yes.
That whole idea of women needing to orgasm and that whole not understanding something and therefore labelling it as a medical condition.
Yes, and that there's something wrong. And if we can control it, then we're not stuck in fear, because the solution to fear is control, right? Yeah. So the thing is that sexuality can't necessarily be controlled, and neither can a woman. So it's never kind of going to work. But we've come full spectrum to being entirely shut down, to all of a sudden we have this very much probably Y generation swing of it's all out there, and there's the porno industry and a huge amount of sexualization within our culture today. But it's a very male-based sexuality, and as we've discussed previously as well, there's not a huge amount of depth or female intimacy about it. So being that I am a worker with women and a birth worker, I've seen so many vaginas. And I'm just going to say, I even am considering not using the word vagina anymore, because I read in one of Mama Gina's book that the word vagina itself actually means sheath, as in like the sheath that you put a sword into. So it's only referring to the orifice itself.
Yeah.
It's not actually referring to the entirety of what she then classifies as the pussy. Because where's the labia and the clitoris and all other amazingness that's there. It's not just a hole.
Yeah, right. I mean, anatomically, the vagina is actually higher up than everything that we see on the outside. So, yeah, it's not even correct in terms of what we're talking about in a lot of this anyway.
Yeah. So, maybe we'll henceforth, spiritual vagina, well, who knows? I might chop and change between pussy and vagina, but I want you to know that when we're using the word vagina, as much as it's anatomical, it's really just discussing a whole as opposed to the complexity of what is actually available there. So, the first thing I've noticed about working with women with birth is that the more comfortable they are with their sexuality and the easier they tend to birth, the more in touch they are with their bodies. The more comfortable they are with their vaginas, the more comfortable they are with being vulnerable and out there. Because we even have this stigma now, don't we, so much around, or certainly it's what I grew up with, that it was to some extent not okay to receive oral sex because there was something dirty or gross or that shouldn't be seen about that there. Or that in birth men shouldn't be down the business end because they'll never want to go there again. It's too gross. Yeah. And we have all these layers of cultural whatnot around the grossness, and then we have the period and the lack of connection to our cycles and our juiciness involved in all areas. So there's a huge, for me, when I think about women and sexuality and the orgasmic life, is that there's a huge amount missing in connection with femininity and with those areas of our body. And when we can really own those areas with our body with pride and with total comfort and curiosity, it's profound what comes out of that. This concept of multi-orgasmic and tantra, sure, is absolutely entwined in that, but the word itself, orgasm, for me then completely changes, because as opposed to it being the build up to this, spasmic, 5-second experience, orgasm can literally be an hour-long experience. So the book I would ask you to read if you're even remotely interested in any of this, because let me tell you, after years of knowing more about vaginas than any other woman I've ever met, this book blew my mind. And that was the illustrated guide, or not, there was another one, I can't think, of Extended Massive Orgasm by Vera and Steve Badansky, I think it is. And it was phenomenal. So they talk about, their concept is, it's an entire book devoted to the pussy and specifically the clitoris. Now, I didn't realize so much about the clitoris. I've heard so much about, there's 8,000 nerve endings on the clitoris, so you might as well use them. But we have almost a hidden, I'm going to say penis. It's almost, the clitoris is almost like a hidden penis and then kind of branches out like a butterfly. So the G-spot is actually the other end of the clitoris, the nerve endings that attach to the other end of the ligaments and muscles inside of there. So we have this entire organ beyond just the 8,000 nerve endings that we can physically see and touch that is entirely devoted to pleasure. So orgasm can literally be extended and massive beyond anything you would ever consider when we're open to breath work. So breathing it up and relaxing as opposed to tensing and clenching, actually breathing and relaxing. Because when you really hit the sweet spot, it's absolutely mind-blowing. So read that book. Understand and know where your clitoris is. So in particularly, it's worth teaching your partner, because I think often they don't, they kind of had a vague idea, but no one's really instructed them, this is how to do it, and da-da-da-da-da. But obviously it's under the hood, so you've really got to pull the hood back. So you're pressing it. I've sort of tried with different ways, but I think you can pull it back or you can press it down. They call what's in their book, they call it anchoring the clitoris. So the clitoris can move around a fair bit, but if you anchor it with your fingers, and then it becomes this free-for-all, and it expands and grows like a penis does with more arousal, so it becomes even easier to pleasure and expand. Anyway, I'm getting off track and making it purely about pleasure, which it's not. But what I want to say to you is, there is more about the clitoris and the vagina than I ever knew existed, and I knew more than most women I knew. So that
so
says
fascinating
It's fascinating. It says to me how little I knew. And the whole idea of Tantra is about, yes, knowing where all the different G-spots are, and there's about 8 within and around the vagina. But it's beyond that. It's about connection with each other. So it's, you know, when we talk about those moments of inspiration or those moments of almost tearful, joyous, can't be anywhere else but in the present moment feeling, that is what essentially Tantra is, with the extended massive orgasm. So orgasm itself, I want to expand what that means. It's not just the muscle spasm. It's that build up, you know, that feeling before you get to an orgasm where you're just entirely, it's desire and it's seduction and it's paramount, right? It's joyful and lustrous and you just want to be in it and around it, and you couldn't give an absolute anything about how you looked or what roles were there or what, because you are so just expanded in sensuality, sexuality and joyous expansion with this other person that you know, anything feels amazing. That's what orgasm is. And that's also being in the feminine, right? Being able to be in that extended space. And Tantra teaches you, yes, how to expand that particular longing phase and how to breathe. They talk about breathing it upwards. So, and that's what historically we would have done in cults that worshipped, obviously, phallic symbols and, the sex gods of old times, was we would use orgasm to expand what we believed was possible with affirmation and so on and so forth, using that huge energy surge, which I believe is entirely possible as well. Anyway, Spiritual Vagina. I don't know where else to go with this other than read that book and start to know your vagina, start to explore. Because the other thing I really noticed is that we have now a lot of reliance on vibrators.
Yeah.
And I can even say that I believed in my head that I couldn't come any other way. That, well, you know, there was intimacy with my partner, but if I was on my own and I was allowing myself that space, I had to have a vibrator. But I think it was because I didn't really know
how to touch yourself,
how to touch myself and how to do that. And this book completely changed that for me. And now can't even stand a vibrator because it does not give you anywhere near the same amount of pleasure. And I've even heard that it does desensitize your nerve endings. So, but I want to say to you, it's entirely possible to have the most phenomenal orgasmic experience that is whole body, not just focused on one particular muscle and area, by expanding that. So vulnerability definitely is getting comfortable with your body enough for it to be. And let me tell you, women worry about how they look like, what they look like in orgasm and what they look like in the bedroom. And often that can take away from the pleasure because they're worried about they have to look at this particular way for them to be desirable and sexy. But the thing that's desirable and sexy, you ask any man ever, is a woman who is thoroughly and utterly enjoying herself.
And embracing all that she is in that moment and just being fully there.
And watching her receive more pleasure than they even thought was possible from them is exponentially sexier than looking like a porn star.
Totally.
So I also want to shift that in that what is it to really be orgasmic is, when we talked about last week, really owning who you are, is what is your connection like with your body. So how do you know what your boundaries are, what your edges are, what you're not comfortable with is just as important, and knowing that you're safe to call those shots as knowing what you want and following and having the courage and the vulnerability to really follow that breath, that feeling, being able to say and speak, I just want you to do this, being able to spend time, like we talked about last week, training our partners with words and sentences, being able to train them in physical action and movement, because it might be as much a learning curve for you as it is for them.
Totally. And I mean, I think that's probably, I was probably speaking from my own experience. It's looking at, okay, first of all, how do you feel listening to this podcast and some of the words that are coming out, the theme? I mean, I guess you must be somewhat interested if you've clicked on it, because the heading is, the title is Spiritual Vagina. But I think for so many women, and this is certainly my story, you know, we can almost shut down that part of ourselves to some degree, because of past subconscious, you know, like stored emotions around it, or just not feeling enough as a woman, so I'll just kind of not go there. It hasn't really worked for me much, so we'll just sort of sweep that under the rug.
Yeah.
And it's about having the courage to go there and to try and just begin to peel back some of those layers around, you know, where are my vulnerabilities around bearing myself, around releasing and being fully in that moment, around letting go enough to achieve orgasm and to give myself that pleasure, you know, because there's, you know, quite a large percentage of women who really struggle to achieve orgasm and you know, as a result mean that, you know, sex becomes even less desirable, you know, and when for a lot of women who are in the family way, it just goes down the food chain, right? But if you're not getting enormous pleasure from it, then it goes even further down. So, but there's such a richness and such an opportunity for awakening when you can carve out that time and space to get to know yourself first, to know what you like, to then have the courage to tell that to your partner.
Absolutely. And I also think you've got to be intentional. So when we're talking about even the concept of self-pleasuring, I don't know, it's a funny one because I think on some level we're comfortable and accepting of it because it seems like the empowered woman. But on another level, when it becomes really personal, it's almost like, well, I don't have time and I can't do that and I'm not really interested. But it's as much about setting up the space and the time for you to pleasure yourself as it is for your partner to pleasure you. Yeah. So it is literally saying, well, okay, maybe I've got, you know, an altar to my seductress that's in my bedroom. It can be something little. It can be a candle and a picture that really says to you about what you want to feel or be or whatever. It can be a scent. It can be you rub a particular oil on your body. It can be candlelight. It can be that you want to put on lingerie or not. But you have to actually set the space up for seducing yourself. As much as you would expect to be seduced by someone else.
Absolutely.
And when you set it up with that intention and you're going into it not expecting you're not outcome focused on the orgasm. You're walking into that experience with curiosity. Curiosity about what can my body do, curiosity about what am I going to discover, curiosity about what feels really good and what doesn't work, with the tool set, with the mindset that it's a toolkit that you can use with your partner. So it's a self-discovery process that you can hand on that skill set to them. That's the mindset to go in there with. It's not, I need to achieve orgasm. Come on. That's not what this is. This is about awakening your seduction, awakening that slow, longing process of loving your flesh. That's what this process is about. It's not about the end result, because orgasm in the frame of a seductress is everything around her is orgasmic, because everything brings her joy and pleasure and rapture. From the touch to a caress to the feeling of sheets on your skin, to the oil you rub in your body, to the sounds or the music that you have playing, all of it is seductive and pleasurable and therefore orgasmic because of the sensation. And the more you can connect in with those individually and collectively, the higher, that doesn't make sense, the higher, the more expansive, the more extended that orgasmic state becomes. So it's not the male-driven focus of the end result, tiny muscle spasm orgasm. It's all of the awakening and seduction in between that is orgasmic.
It's the process.
It's the process. Of course, there's orgasm in between, and this book, Extended Massive Orgasm, also teaches you how to bring yourself up and then bring yourself back down, which is the Tantra process of...
What I love and what I've learned that really has been quite interesting too is that I did it as opposed to, you know, typically with orgasm, it's about, you know, releasing that energy as it comes into you in a wave. It's actually breathing it in.
Yes. And
absorbing that energy and bringing it up within you. So you're actually storing it for yourself as opposed to letting it out. And the book touches on that too, doesn't it?
It totally does, yeah. That whole concept. But that's Tantra too, that concept of spiritually breathing, because orgasmic energy is even more, it's kind of the heightened pinnacle of sexual energy, isn't it? And you think about how powerful sexual energy is. And that's why we used it as pagans for ritual, in a ritualistic way, because of how much energy and intent and focus was in that orgasm itself. It was a massive massive almost spiritual release. And when you're looking at it spiritually, you are like when you're giving birth, you're open. So you're spiritually, emotionally, physically open. You're kind of blasted open. You have this opportunity to connect with the divine. So it is as much about how do I, and that's what I want to get across to, is our ability for our bodies to give us so much pleasure and rapture and ecstasy is the divine. The feeling of unconditional spiritual love is that feeling of that rapturous moment. That is the divine. That is our God-given, who knows what, happening in our body. Like, that is what it is. And so to be able to
that's what we have these bodies for, is to explore and to feel that fullness of being in these bodies we have, you know, like to be able to feel the, you know, take us to our ever.
Absolutely. So, okay, so we've talked about roughly what it means to spiritually connect during orgasm, that we do need to find the pathway to pleasuring ourselves. And I also think every book I've ever read and course I've been to does just open up every conversation with, you need to spend time looking at your pussy.
Yes. So
getting a mirror, studying her, looking at what she looks like and how she changes. Sometimes during pleasuring you might stop and have a look, because she'll swell and change colour from deep hues of purple to shades of pink and blush and red and everything in between, and getting comfortable with the secretions and the juiciness and all of those flow of life that says fertile and woman, is getting comfortable with that again, as opposed to getting icked out about it, which is where we tend to go now with our shut down Brazilian porno kind of wavelength that's going on now. And that's not to say that any of that is wrong, because there is a time and a place for all of the above and however you want to share your sexuality. But not at the expense of feeling like what your body does goes against what you want. If you're having those sorts of feelings around my body's not okay, you're never going to be able to reach those heights of utter ecstasy, because you've always capped it.
Yeah.
So to be able to really let loose, to be able to really experience Tantra extended massive orgasm, is getting comfortable with what your body is and does, and in flow with that. And that can mean considering getting in flow with what your menstrual cycle is, considering nourishing and nurturing your body in a lot of different ways that say, I'm connected to you and I'm part of you, I'm not working against you. It's, you know, dealing with the belief systems that we have that hold us back around shame and guilt around our bodies or in our appetites. Because if we have, I guarantee you, if you have an overeating obsessive or appetite control issue with your food, it won't just be your food. If your appetite is not acceptable to you with food, your appetites for other areas of your life, including your sexuality, will on some level not be acceptable to you. And so when we start to cap one, we cap all of the others without knowing it. So to be fully expanded, to really experience the heights of who we are, we've got to uncap those belief systems that are standing in our way. And I also realise that there can be a huge amount of trauma in those areas of the body. So if you've undergone sexual abuse, if you've been scarred in some way from an experience, or certainly through childbirth, that there is help and guidance around that. There are particular practitioners who can work specifically with those areas of the body. So I know certain midwives that work even on a physiotherapy level with the muscles of the vagina. So there'll be ligaments and muscles and scar tissue there sometimes that can literally be worked on, and they teach you how to do it yourself or for your partner to do it. That it's not now you can't ever enjoy sex again, that's not what this is. But let's look at the belief systems and what's the stories and the pain that's there, that we can have the ability to release, to work through, to get to the point of really getting back in connection with your womanhood. And it could even be trauma from previous generations.
Absolutely.
So there is this concept of almost psychological DNA that's handed down to us.
Epigenetics.
Yes. So you can be, I mean, we know it as women, right? When we give birth to our daughters, we give birth to our grandchildren, because our daughters are born with the eggs that harvest our grandchildren, it sounds terrible, Harvest, that give life to that give life to our grandchildren. So therefore, I was born essentially when my grandmother gave birth to my mother. So anything that was going on for her, I have within me, and possibly further back than that. So sometimes the stories that we're carrying, the belief systems, the shame, the guilt, the pain, isn't always necessarily ours. So the body workers can work with that on a really fantastic level, and certainly looking at belief systems that have happened within your life as well. What do you have, Bridget?
The belief system stuff, I think, is really powerful. And going back and looking at your own sexual story, so looking at all of the different partners you've had, all the sexual experiences you've had, tapping into how you felt in those and identifying any kind of common thread there was in terms of how you related to those sexual partners, how you felt about your body in those moments, even drilling down further to see if there was any kind of triggering event that then changed the course of how you felt about sex and your body and, intersexual interactions with people as a result of a key event, and then kind of going back and working through that, really working through that particular event and trying to unpack it a little bit more and, in some ways trying to find the gifts and the challenging parts of that, trying to understand how you may have perceived it the way you perceived it, and then to basically break the subconscious hold that has on you so that you can no longer be run by that and then choose actively and consciously your way forward to embrace, your sexuality in a much more holistic and joyful and, seductive kind of way that allows you to live the fullness of what it means to be a woman, which is really to embrace all of this, to give yourself permission.
And when you're thinking about your fertility journey, has part of that awakening been part of that journey for you?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And it's a classic case for a lot of women who have fertility issues is not feeling enough as a woman, and that not feeling enough as a woman often then can shut down your sexuality to a degree. Your desire for sex, your desire to connect with yourself sexually, and it can often be triggered by just a perception of how your mother was with you. Perhaps if you had an over-nurturing mother, that you would then kind of, to create the anti sort of trait that was of what your mother had, you would then kind of be a bit more independent, a little bit more perhaps masculine, maybe in the way that you conduct yourself in terms of your energy, which then can then dim your feminine energy, which can then impact the way that your sexual organs function and your fertility then functions. So it's all very, very tightly interwoven quite often. So part of my journey for fertility has absolutely been going back and understanding a bit more of that journey for me, and just becoming more comfortable with my sexuality and owning it. And it's been profound. It's been so profound. And, I think I was probably that classic teenager of, just looking so much outside of myself for validation. And then when I didn't get it, kind of shutting off parts of myself as a result. And
parts that were then deemed unacceptable.
Yeah. And so that has then meant for me to actively and consciously reawaken my fertility and my whole, what I see as sort of my wholeness as a woman has meant going back in some of those experiences and starting to understand how to get to know my body better and know how to pleasure myself and, create that with my husband even more depth. And it's been quite a journey, and something that I really want to offer other women who are on that fertility journey, because I think it can often be, particularly if you've only ever been exposed to mainstream advice around fertility, it's just left out of the equation most of the time. I went to a GP when I was about 18 and, said to them, I can't orgasm, what can I do? What's wrong with me? And she's like, just go have a few drinks. There was no
oh my God.
There was no, understanding or
but the thing is, she probably doesn't have the toolkit.
No, she wouldn't have. No, she wouldn't have.
Because we're not in the the realm where we worshipped the vulva and the creation process. No. And, we used to revere the goddesses for their, ferocity as much as their seductive, creative ability. But that became just all too scary and wrathful, so we shut that down. And so in that, we also then have lost the generations where we would have women gatherings for women's business. We've lost that connection to community and womanhood over so many generations that we've lost that information. So the information that women used to have about how to create life and how to connect with their bodies and how to connect with the divine and how to, X, Y, and Z, it no longer is a toolkit that's passed down from mother to daughter.
I think women's empowerment's not really gone because it's just changed into a form. It's a different kind of form now. It's women kind of in entrepreneurship and business, but we don't need to. It's not like we have to have one without the other. We can absolutely connect in with our femininity, our sexuality, and really own those parts of ourselves
as a state of being whole and in power. Because when you're really rooted, this is what I've really noticed, when you're really rooted in your femininity and in your sexual energy, and you're really comfortable with where that's sitting, it's amazing how that law of attraction stuff expands out from you, because a woman in a turned on state, and that's me talking about the orgasmic state of just being in flow with life and in joy and in ecstasy.
There's no other energy as powerful and as magnetic as sexual energy.
No, but that's when you're really living that because you're really in connection with your body. Oh, it's like...
Look at world.
It is amazing. Absolutely. So what do we want to leave women with on the spiritual vagina, Bridget?
I think the key thing is getting to know your vagina. You touched on this, but I would love to invite women listening to take 10 minutes this week and a mirror and go there. And sit down somewhere comfortable where you feel safe in your home, or maybe when everyone else is asleep, or maybe when, your husband's asleep on the couch or something. And be willing and open to just look at your vagina and study it. Look at its curves, look at the colour, look at the story that it tells you, marvel at what it's given you. Get to know it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think if looking at it is a step too far and you're not ready to really embrace loving how she looks, but you will get there, is grabbing some lube or some coconut oil or something that you love and just going on an intuition walk. You might start with rubbing it on your skin somewhere, but I want you to end up touching the entirety of your vulva in some way, maybe seeing if you can feel that little pea that feels like the clitoris and seeing what that feels like, feeling in between the folds and around them, just to start to get comfortable and familiar with how she feels. In your month and day to day, checking in, how am I feeling right now? Where am I at with my cycle? And I'm feeling like expanding. Am I feeling like contracting that energy and pulling it in? What happens when I focus my energy down between my legs and I'm just fully clothed, standing wherever I am, could be in the middle of the shopping centre. Just how do I feel when I change where I notice my energy? And how does that change with the people around me, the way that they are responding to me? And number two, what was your number two?
Number two, I think, is for the next week. So this week is either getting to know yourself, with some oil and touching, or getting the mirror. But next week...
And if you start with the oil, then next week you start with the mirror.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then the other option is, or the other thing we'd like you to do is to, again, maybe a full-length mirror and time yourself 10 minutes, no clothes on, staring and wondering at your body. Again, the life it's given you. The life, if you've got children, the children it's given you. What do the the stretch marks represent? What does the belly button that's not quite what it used to be represent? What does the bum that's a bit saggier than it used to be represent? Rather than looking at your body for, what it's lacking, what's it giving you, what has it given you, how does it give you life? How can you be grateful for the different parts of your body that you often unconsciously automatically judge?
Yeah, where's the reverence?
Yes.
For what that body has given you, and getting back in connection with how she feels, because it's amazing when we just shift how we feel about an area of our body, how physically that actually changes.
Absolutely.
So, like, I can even say hated my breasts my whole life, and yet 3 kids later and 3 breastfeedings later, when they really should be at their worst, I feel like I've had a boob job. But I think the only difference is I've changed the way that I perceive them. I send them more love and gratitude. I spend time rubbing oil into my skin and into my body. And that's what you could do in the mirror, is actually just rub something you love into your skin. Do it by candlelight. Turn around, look at start with just the curve of the outside of your hip and just appreciate that. Because you are the muse from which generations of men have created magnificence. Yes. It's in those curves and those folds and the wisdom and the life that's stored within that has created the most phenomenal thinking and poetry and art of our whole evolution.
I love that you've put that spin on it, because it's so true, isn't it? You know, it's the female form has been revered since.
Oh, and you look at Renaissance, where the period of time where we had the greatest creativity and greatest expansion of our social growth and minds. Was when beauty was curvaceous. Yeah. It's when it had folds and breasts that weren't perfect, and you know, the ability to reproduce was seen as, you know, something phenomenal. And you can literally change your physiology by changing your belief systems. Absolutely. If you're feeding every day, I hate you, I don't like you, you're just, as opposed to, I kind of love that curve. Even if you don't love the whole piece, start with a curve. I love that curve. I love how that bit of skin feels. I love that colour. I love how when this happens, it responds in some way. Starting to just love it changes the physiology, because we are constantly changing and evolving every cell within our bodies daily. So you change what you're programming it with, you change how it expresses that. So yes, we talk vaguely about self-love, but here's the crux of the vulnerability of it. Yeah. Here's the getting in flow day to day with your juiciness, with what your body's telling you, responding to your signals, and spending some time creating and carving out the time to actually worship your body, because the more you do that, the easier it is to share with someone else.
Absolutely. I love that.
So we really, really implore that during this festive period, perhaps you have more free time than usual, that you put that free time to good use. And if you want to know any more, we're more than happy to go there. So please message us on Facebook. We're not exactly sure. So nourishingthemother.com on Facebook. We have our retreat coming up on the 5th and 6th of March 2016. So 2 afternoons to dive into your story and recreate the life that you really want to be living. Looking at the belief systems that are holding you back and getting back into alignment with your seductive self. You can connect with Bridget on suburbansandcastles.com.
Yeah. Our film coming up on the 20th of January is Awake, which is all about the introduction of yoga to the West. And it's going to be a fantastic night to kick off our first event of the year. And you can connect with Jules at thepleasurenutritionist.com.
Yes, you can, for consults, book coming and blog, also on Instagram and Facebook. So we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
We hope you enjoyed this Wellness Couch podcast brought to you by Audible. Do you find that you just don't have time to read all the awesome books that you hear mentioned on the Wellness Couch? Well, Audible might just have the answer. Audible is offering the Wellness Couch listeners a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. You can get books like Eat Right for Your Blood Type, Why We Get Fat by Gary Taubes, Paleo Diet for Athletes, or even The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. So to download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/The Wellness Couch. Again, that's audibletrial.com/The Wellness Couch for your free audiobook.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.